What's the vibe, y'all? Welcome to another episode of Running Off the Screen. I'm the man they call Mac. And for today's episode, I have a special guest, as you can see. Most of you know him as the Podfather. I think of him as Professor X to the institution that is Raptors Republic. Welcome to the show, Zarar. How have you been?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on. What an intro. What an intro. I don't think I've ever been called anything like that. But yeah, I'll take it all, man. I'll take the accolades. Give it to me.
So before we get into our topics, I would like to remind all the listeners, people tuning in, that there is a live pre-trade deadline show that Raptors Republic is hosting. And it will be at Rivoli, Toronto. And it's going to be Tuesday, February 7th. And any more details that you want to give the listeners?
You got it. It's 6 o'clock at Rivoli, Toronto on Queen Street West. It's 2 days before the trade deadline. So I'm sure there's going to be lots to talk about. And like all the RR writers and lots of readers will be there. Sam, Lewis, Katie, Oren, Andrew, a bunch of people, so lots of topic. Maybe even a couple of 905 players might show up. So it's going to be a good evening of basketball talk, and we can vent, we can have some fun, we can have some drinks, we can have some food. It should be good. February 7th, it's a Tuesday night at Rivoli in Toronto. The ticket link is on Raptors Republic.
Nice. And speaking of trade deadline, I know there's been issues with how this bench has been utilized throughout the last couple of years. But when you talk about bench issues, I want to get your perspective on this. Is it a coaching issue or is it a front office issue?
Let's assume that it's a coaching issue for a minute. Let's just assume that that's what the problem is, that this collective group of players has the solution in them, and it's just Nick Nurse that hasn't been able to extract that solution out. Let's assume that's the case. But if you think that is the case, then you should also be in a position to propose some solution to the problem. You can't just say it's a coaching issue and not come up with a response and say it's a coaching issue because of this, and I think this is what we should do. I find it lacking. I haven't seen anybody propose something else to do with this lineup, which says, oh, Nick Nurse has got this particular aspect of this lineup wrong. He should be doing this, and that'll solve our problems. All I've heard is sort of like, moving the deck chairs around on the Titanic, where you're like, yeah, start Chris Boucher, don't start Chris Boucher. Yeah, start Koloko, don't start Koloko. Kem Burge, it's like, it's very kind of like low, mediocre value pieces being moved in and out of the starting lineup that people think as solutions. If you think the coaching is an issue, if you think the lineups are an issue, those are the types of solutions that I heard. And I don't really, they're not very convincing arguments, to me at least, that, oh, that's the problem. And I think you also have to look at sort of the sample size of the Raptors now. This is not, I know we're at like 38, 39 games so far. But if you look at, the last 2 to 3 years, 2 years, maybe Tampa, we don't talk about, maybe we disregard that. Maybe we don't. I don't know. I don't actually, I'm not of the camp that we should just disregard Tampa completely. I think Tampa gives us a lot of information about the decisions the front office made, how the team played. So it's not like a write-off season where you go, oh, Tampa, let's just forget about it. No, Tampa happened, guys. It happened, and it's there. It's on our record books, and there's something to be learned from it. But besides Tampa, last year and this year, Nick Nurse has tried a lot of different things in terms of lineup rotations. In fact, I'd say he's actually done more experimentation than what you would expect of a coach. A coach usually just drives his starters to death, and he hasn't really done that. I know he's accused of doing that by playing Fred VanVleet like 34, 35 minutes a game, but he has tried to tinker with the bench and see what works, and not much really has. So that's why I don't think this is really a coaching issue, because number one, I don't have any solutions for it. And number two, he's already tried a bunch of things. And so by the process of elimination, I arrive at your second option with that this is most likely a personnel issue than it is a coaching issue.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like you were saying, Nick Nurse hasn't really been handed a group that has shown the ability to be a cohesive unit for a stretch of games. And that's why he's been able to plug in players here and there. Now, I would say one thing. I think he should have gave Delano Banton, someone like him, a more of a run. Because if you're going to lose these games, I think it would be nicer to at least get some development going in real game action with your young players, as opposed to running your starters 40 minutes a game and then still losing and not really gaining anything from that.
But that wasn't your question, though. Your question was, is the losing a coaching or a front office issue? If the goal is, in that question, I assume the goal was to actually win games. When you say give Delano Banton run, I don't think you're striking fear into any of the other Eastern Conference teams here. They're like, oh, Delano Banton's getting some run. Let's play the Raptors more often.
Yeah.
Right. So giving Delano Banton run is speaks to a different goal for the franchise, which is more like sort of a little bit more development oriented than I think what fans are expecting right now.
That's a good point. So, because I was trying to say, like with Delano or even like Malachi, it took him a while to get in. At least we know what he is now. That's why I'm thinking the bench problems may be more coaching driven. It's a mix of both, to be honest, because we don't have Serge Ibaka coming off the bench anymore. We don't have Norman Powell. Like, it's obvious. But I when I'm thinking of what the problems are coming from is there's no minutes coming off the bench. So obviously there's no production coming off the bench. So that's why I kind of wanted to see if that was an issue. But another issue that we see the Raptors go through is free agency. And as great as Masai has been with making trades and drafting, it's on the opposite spectrum when you talk about free agency. Could you pinpoint anyone or think of anyone who was the best free agent signing in the Masai era, and why?
That's like Best is doing a lot of heavy lifting in this in this conversation, because you're right, he hasn't had a lot of success at free agency. I think the free agency talk around Masai has been more hype than anything. I mean, I think that the most excited I was for free agency was when Giannis was a free agent and the Raptors had maybe enough space to get him. There was some talk that the Raptors might get him, but then he resigned pretty quickly, and that was sort of the end of it. Other than that, if you look at his free agent signings, and I'm talking about not like re-signing a guy who was already here or a guy you acquired in a trade. I'm talking like actual going out on the market and getting somebody. You're looking at a pretty poor resume here, and the best names I could find on that list are not glamorous by any means. Like Bismack Biyombo, Luis Scola kind of come to mind. And then one of the most high-profile free agent signings that he had was DeMario Carroll, who did not really mesh well in Toronto. And that was after the big year he had in Atlanta. And after that, the list quickly dwindles into the likes of Bembry, Matt Thomas. I could argue, I could actually make a case that it probably is Bismack Biyombo for that 1 year he was here. And I might say, as horrible as it sounds, Thaddeus Young might not be. He might be in a top third or top 25% free agency signings by Masai. I love Masai. I don't want him going anywhere. I hope he resigns for the next whatever year. But his free agency record is not good.
Yeah,
we should also say that I don't think the Raptors have been in a position where they've had a lot of cap space to go and execute on big time free agents. They've always sort of been up against the wall and trying to re-sign their own guys. So it's not like they've had the opportunity to walk into free agency with like 40 million to spend like some of these teams you see have. So we should also consider that as well.
That's a very good point. And it's like you said, it's not an easy list to pick from. But one guy I really liked as a signing was Rondé Hollis-Jefferson. I think as much as he didn't provide on the offensive end, I think defensively and energy-wise, he was a force for us. And he was one of the most versatile defenders in the NBA at that time. And I think I really hoped that he was going to get like an extension, because he ended up getting the 1 year deal. And I believe Stanley Johnson got the 2 year deal, but it was a player option on the second year. And I thought it should have been flipped the other way around. Yeah. But that's neither here or there. And if I could recall, Rondé lost his job or his opportunity because they wanted to give Paul Watson an extended look. and Bembry got brought in, and then Yuta got brought in, and then Ronde ended up being expendable. But I thought Ronde would have been a better guy to bring on for a longer term. And to try and keep things positive,
we don't have to keep things positive. We just talk about things the way they are. I mean, they don't have to be positive or negative. They can just be the reality. It's not like, as I think I was on the Sportsnet show with Will the other day. I was like we don't we're just fans. We're talking about things that are going on. Everybody's having fun. Nobody's getting too upset about it. We maybe we should talk about like why there's a lot of I feel rage watching going on these days, where I actually feel like there are people like wanting the Raptors to lose. Like I've actually gotten that sense from some people that there are people out there like because they want to criticize the team, they're kind of actively rooting against the team in some cases, which I found extremely odd, because why are you even a fan if you're like so hateful towards the team? And it's not like this team has like an effort problem, or they're not likable, or they're not trying hard enough. Like they're literally doing the best they can. They don't have the personnel maybe, but this is still a fun team to watch. Yes, there are moments where, or not moments, there are stretches and there are games where it's like, oh my god, like the Orlando double that we lost, like that kind of wanted me to just pull my hair out. But overall, this is not a terrible team to watch. I think they play okay basketball. It's a bit ISO heavy, but the players are likable. They play hard. We are in an experiment. Like Masai has stated several times, we're doing the 6-9 experiment or whatever. And somehow people think that an experiment always has to be successful. It's not. An experiment has a hypothesis, and then you test that hypothesis, and then that hypothesis either fails or it holds true, and based on that you make more decisions. So just because we entered a 6-9 experiment for this year and the last year does not necessarily mean that it's going to work, and it may not work. That is not a failure on the franchise. That is a legit attempt by the franchise to do something different. They may fail at it, but we shouldn't hold them. We shouldn't hold it against them for failure. We should give them first for kudos for trying something. Mm-hmm. Now, if they stick with it for too long, that's a different story.
Yeah, but we're only like year 2 of the retool, I guess, right?
Yeah, and people who like want to blow stuff up and do tank, like do you have any options, or are you just talking for the sake of talking? Do you actually have solutions that work beyond just the trade machine?
Very good point, because I think we're a little bit spoiled. All that success we've seen in the last few years, one little hint of adversity, we just want to give up. And it's hilarious to see the fan base and how toxic it is on Twitter. Like after a win, we're all dancing and holding hands, and after a loss, we're all looking at tankathon.com and draft and saying, "Oh, Wemby or Scoot Henderson," and that's the lifestyle of a Toronto Raptors fan base. I guess around the NBA is similar. I wouldn't know because I'm a Raptors fan. But if you're looking at the 6-9 experiment, are there some things that you think are working this year that you like going on this season so far?
Yeah, I mean, in stretches for sure. I mean, the most recent example is the Portland game. I think when Portland was making that run in the fourth quarter, that lead went down from like 15 to 10 to 7 to 5 to 3, and you're like, here we go. It's about to blow up again. And then you saw the Raptors, Scotty Barnes in particular, and Gary Trent Jr., play the passing lanes the way we all thought this team was able to play the passing lanes. I think they got like 2 or 3 turnovers when the score was 3, or there was a 3 or 5 point lead, and they ran it back for some points. And you could genuinely see the Portland Trailblazers surprised at the passes being picked off, because they've made those passes, like Lillard driving in and kicking out to the wing. They make those passes with other teams, and they execute there. But against the Raptors and their kind of anticipatory length and all that, they didn't work. So yeah, there are things that are definitely working about the 6-9. I don't think we should be too negative about that. There are things that are working, but as a whole, season-long strategy, things are not working. We should also be honest about that. But and I do think it's it's I don't necessarily of the opinion that we should throw out the roster or like trade everybody or anything like that. Uh, I see a basketball problem on the court. I see a lack of a center. I see a lack of 3-point shooting being the problem rather than like a take like Pascal Siakam is not a number one player or Fred VanVleet is garbage. Like those are those are very reactionary and kind of maybe cathartic takes that make you feel better about and make you your rage kind of goes out of your body and you feel a little bit better momentarily. But I see more basketball problems that are solvable through some personnel tweaks rather than kind of blowing everything up.
I totally agree with that. It's glaring, and I think we're in a good spot when you really think about it. We have a young guard with Gary Trent Jr. coming into extension. Now, I hear a lot of people saying that he should be traded, but in my mind, I'm like, well, what are we going to trade him for? Are we going to trade him for another guy who's 23 years old, who's a guard? Like, why not just keep him and build through this hardship that we're going through right now? And it's not even really that much of a hardship, because if you look at that middle of the East, we're like 5 games from 6th, right? And we're a couple games from the play-in, and we're one stretch or a couple stretches away from being a competitive team again. And like you said, with those like fine-tuning around the edges, getting maybe another center in there, maybe get another guard if you want to, we'll be right back in the mix and everyone will be celebrating about it. Now, where I think that the 6-9 experiment may not have worked is that I feel that this team, they have a lot of similar guys who can defend on the wings, but I feel like they all had similar weaknesses, right? And one weakness I think that I seen was more or less the toughness on the defensive boards. Do you think, as a coach, you could teach toughness to a player?
You could be super tough and not get defensive rebounds. I think we shouldn't conflate toughness with the ability to rebound. I think, there's probably some correlation there, but I don't think we have the personnel to rebound. I don't think we're not rebounding because we're not tough enough. I think we're rebounding because we don't have the personnel to rebound. When you put I don't know what Chris Boucher weighs, but he looks pretty slender out there. Most centers put him on his back, and the way Chris Boucher gets rebound is he has to time his rebounds perfectly, or he has to use his length to kind of go and tip it back to him. He's not going to muscle another guy out for a rebound. So he has to almost like get it perfect to get good rebounds or to get rebounds that he shouldn't be getting. So Chris Boucher is a tough guy. And I can tell you that for a fact, like based on whatever little insider knowledge that I have of the Raptors, Chris Boucher is a tough mofo. There's no doubt about that. So he's not getting rebounds because he's not tough enough. That's for sure. We have a personnel issue. That's a different issue. Now, you asked the question, can you teach toughness? I actually, by profession, I'm actually a coach for software development teams. So I know a little bit about coaching more than most people do. You can't directly teach toughness, but you can introduce a culture where players play hard and don't back down. And I don't think we have to look too further back in our history to see examples of that. I think Dwayne Casey is a perfect example of a guy who came in and really did introduce a culture change here. Like, I know we make fun of him because he had a giant rock in the locker room, which is now somewhere in Scarborough. Like somebody got it for like $14 on Kijiji. It's like lying in their backyard. I don't know what happened to the rock, okay? But, so Dwayne Casey was not without his quirks, right? But he did introduce a culture change, which resulted in the Raptors playing really hard defense and expending effort and not backing down. Dwayne Casey had other issues with his lineups and all that, which are not really worth getting into. But he was a guy who introduced a culture which yielded a toughness in his players. Now, did he go up to them and said, "Hey, man, you got to be tough"? No. He set some parameters on how you should be, what the expectations are when you walk into the locker room, and that in turn yielded things like toughness and grit and effort and all the other things. So yes, you can definitely coach your way into toughness, but you can't really directly coach toughness.
That's very interesting. So at the end of the day, it's just a personnel issue, like you said. So if the season did go on the way it's been going, like we're under 500 out of the playoffs, are you under the thought process of, okay, let's just continue with the finer tweaks, or do you want to do a complete rebuild?
I kind of laugh at this complete rebuild. Like, how spoiled are we?
I
Like,
know.
what is our like? It's like we're children. Like, we don't get what we want and we throw a tantrum. Like, that's the attitude that I find of fans. Like, oh, we're not a 60-win team. Blow it all up because I didn't get exactly what I wanted. It's like maybe it speaks to the generation that's following the team right now. But no, I don't think we should be blowing anything up. Yeah, maybe we should trade Fred if he's not a good fit based on his interview with the JJ Redick. I came out of the impression that he wants to be a more central figure, and he's forced to get his offense in not the ideal way that he would like to get it. So maybe Fred is not a great fit. Maybe, right? I don't 100% know. So maybe he's a guy you can move to fill in some other weaknesses. But those are the kinds of tweaks that I'm talking about. I don't think we need to like trade Pascal or trade Fred or do anything. I think we need to make a couple of moves. Maybe we have to part with OG. But if we part with OG, we should be getting somebody who's like, ready to play now, not like a guy who 5 years down the road. And sorry, to go back to Fred a little bit. His explanation, by the way, made complete sense to me. I don't think he said anything that was that didn't make sense to me. His idea basically was, listen, I still may be taking 8 threes a game, but there are different types of 8 threes. There are 8 threes that, as a spot up shooter, the 8 threes you get are different than the threes you get as a ball handler who's more actively involved in the offense. So I can totally buy the argument that you can take the same amount of shots a game and have a lower percentage because those shots are coming from a different way. And if you play even like beer league basketball, just pick up basketball 3-on-3 at your local gym with your buddies, or any sort of organized or unorganized basketball, that should resonate to you. And if you don't really understand that perspective from Fred VanVleet, then I would argue that you should pick up a basketball and play some games.
Exactly. And I agree with you. It doesn't make sense to do this rebuild that I keep seeing out there in the, I guess, social networks. And I agree. I want us to retool. If there is an odd man out again, I think Fred would be the odd man out because of what he wants for his career, for his like business wise. He maybe want to go to a bigger market, get bigger money. Who's gonna give him that? I'm not sure. But yeah, you made excellent points. Is there anything else that you want to add?
On Fred? I think he's at the age where he has one big contract in him. I think there was a report that came out yesterday or a couple days ago, I don't know, where he said, yeah, there was no formal offer being made. Of course, there's no formal offer being made. You never make a formal offer until you verbally agree with something. That doesn't necessarily mean the earlier report by whichever reporter reported it was not true. Like if I'm selling this phone on Kijiji, I'm not making formal offers in written documents and like setting bank drafts. I'm like, hey man, is $200 okay? And then we kind of do the deal on Interact. It same happens in a deal. Like, is 40 million okay? And then you do the paperwork. So yes, just because no formal offer was made does not mean that the reports were untrue. And Fred's whole thing is this bet on himself. So maybe he I don't know, maybe he rolled the dice when he shouldn't have. I guess time will tell.
That's a good point. So how do you feel the season's gonna go? Do you think we're gonna end up fighting through this and making the playoffs?
That's a difficult question, man. I do think this team is better than its record. My question is, if you make the playoffs, what does that really, like, what does that really mean? I mean, beyond having a playoff series in Toronto, which is always fun. Regardless of if we make the playoffs or not, I do think we need to make a move at the deadline to fix this roster and the imbalance that exists on this roster with the amount of with the lack of playmaking lack of ball handling that exists from the guard spots, and the lack of ball handling and scoring that exists off the bench. Malachi Flynn, God bless him, like he's doing better, but we need an upgrade at that position. Siakam, I think, is burdened with way too much of a load in terms of creativity, ball handling, scoring. I'm I probably have a slightly lower kind of overall projection of Siakam than most people. I think he's a fantastic player. But I think we ask too much of him sometimes. Honestly, I think we're expecting way too much of him sometimes.
I mean, yeah, I think we're asking a lot of our like top four guys, to be honest, and it's really hitting us. And I think that's it for today. I think we've breezed through a bunch of these these topics. Anything else you wanted to plug for the next few events coming up for Raptors Republic?
No, I got nothing to plug, man. I just come to Raptors Republic, check out. I mean, I just ask, like, when the team is going south. By the way, this is not a bad team. Like, if fans think this is a bad team, either they're kind of newer fans, or they just have very poor memory of what this franchise has been through. So if you are like raging these days because this team isn't living up to your expectations, just go look at Basketball Reference, look at some previous teams that existed, and compare this roster to and maybe you'll be a little bit more thankful for what you currently have on this team than trying to freaking trade everybody and blow up the roster and tank this and tank that. Like, go pick up a history book.
I think that's a perfect way to end the episode. Thank you so much for joining me today, Zarar. And for everybody else watching, remember to like, subscribe, and raise the vibe. Peace.